Hello and welcome. My name is Zafar Iqbal and you are watching the Mojo Story. Canada has provoked again. On the first anniversary of Khalistani separatist Hareep Singh Nijjer's assassination, the Canadian House of Commons observed a moment of silence. On the same day, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, speaking to CBC News, said Narendra Modi's re-election as India's Prime Minister presents an opportunity for Canada to engage on critical issues, including national security and the rule of law. Now, Nijjar was killed outside a Gurdwara in Surrey, British Columbia in June 2023, a year ago, exactly a year ago. The visuals you can see on that screen is the moment of silence in the Canadian Parliament. Now, four Indian nationals are on trial for his murder in Canada. India has clearly denied any involvement in the killing. Now, relations soared after Trudeau's September 2023 allegations in the Canadian Parliament, where he said that agents of the government of India were responsible for Nijjer's killing. India has obviously said that all those allegations are absurd and motivated. But while the Canadian Parliament commemorated Nijjer, the Indian consulate in Vancouver remembered the 1985 Air India flight bombing victim, the Kanishka bombing victims, in which many people were killed. India has, in fact, put out that tweet in that consulate Twitter handle. But you can see again those visuals, the moment of silence, all the members of the parliament standing in silence on the anniversary of the assassination of Hareep Singh Nijjer. To speak on this issue, we're joined by an eminent panel from Delhi. We're joined by Major General Dhruv Katoch, a defense analyst. Welcome to the show, General Saab. We're also joined by Ambassador Dilip Sinha, who's a former diplomat. Welcome to the show, Ambassador Dilip Sinha. If I may start with you, what do you make of this moment of silence, by the Canadian Parliament exactly a year after the assassination of Khalistani separatist Hareep Singh Nijjer? There is a messaging in it, obviously, the entire Parliament, observing that moment of silence.
A ruling party being held hostage by a small minority partner, but a partner that is crucial to the survival of the ruling party. The 24 odd MPs of the New Democratic Party, led by Jagmeet Singh, hold the key to power, hold the balance of power in Canada. And Trudeau knows that he can stay in power only as long as he has the support of Jagmeet Singh. If he goes for elections today, he may well lose. So this is Jagmeet Singh's politics, where he is carrying his politics and forcing the government to follow his agenda. They are observing the 1 year of the killing of Nijjer. But in this 1 year, we are not aware of anything that's being shared by the Canadian government of the evidence that Prime Minister Trudeau claimed to have when he made the allegation last year. And the larger issue of Canada giving shelter to such elements, such forces in its country, that's a larger issue. But this particular mourning ceremony is really shameful, because you mourn for a person who's a person of honor, a person whom you respect, who revere. You commemorate his memory. Now, what is there in Nijjer? Even if you accuse the government of India of having killed Nijjer, Nijjer was essentially a terrorist wanted by India. A lot of evidence had been provided by India to the Canadian government for his repatriation, for action against him. Now, what does Canada see in Nijjer to commemorate and to honor him? That is for the Canadian people and the government to answer.
Exactly. That's the question, General Katoch. What do they see in his man that they are honoring him? He was a separatist, a Khalistani separatist. India has been asking Canada and informing them about him, while as on the other hand, Canada didn't share any evidence about so-called Indian involvement in his assassination. These are the two things that are right in front of us. And given that as the context, what is there to commemorate about him? What is there to honor about him? This moment of silence when the members stand in silence for a man who India has been accusing of a separatist and who has been fomenting anti-India sentiments in Canada. Yeah, General Katuch.
Old English saying, yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Zafar?
Yes, I can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Yeah. There is an old English saying, yeah, there's an old English saying, those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. I think Canada is going through that moment, not just their prime minister. I think that, the entire, the government machinery there is going through what I can only call a moment of madness. Now, you have referred to Mr. Nijjar, this Nijjar chap, as a separatist. The Indian government has designated him as a terrorist. Let there be no doubts
Right.
about it. Canada
Right.
knows that the Indian
Right.
government designated this man as a terrorist. Not only that, the Canadian government also knows that he has entered Canada in 1995 on a fraudulent passport on the name of one Ravi Sharma. Having known all this, you are still trying to honor this man. There is something very, very disturbing and something seemingly wrong in the actions taken by the government of Canada. They are, in my view, supporters of terrorism,
Right.
and any talk which the West now talks of,
Right.
putting people and the axis of terror and fighting terrorism is all hogwash. They are downright supporters of terrorism, and Canada is leading the way, and India must tell them, get out. That is one. Number two, why are they doing it? The ambassador, of course, has given the viewpoint that Mr. Trudeau is on a very precarious plank in the number of seats which he is holding, and he's desperate to retain power. That is true. He is desperate to retain power.
Right. But the Ambassador Sinha, isn't there a contradiction of sorts? On one hand, Justin Trudeau says that Prime Minister Modi has been re-elected and there is an opportunity in his re-election. On the other hand, the messaging, the signaling that Canada is giving out, honoring a man who India clearly says is a terrorist. What sort of a signal are the mixed signals that are coming out from Canada, and how should India react to this mixed signaling?
Well, as General Katoch says, this is a moment of madness, a sign of something very seriously wrong in Canadian politics and Canadian popular thinking. If they can honor a person like Nijjar, it really is very serious for the Canadians. Now, as far as India's reaction is concerned, I think we should certainly make it clear to the Canadians that this is intolerable. We should continue to provide them evidence of the terrorist acts, the funding of terror groups in India that is going on from Canada. We should also make them aware of the dangers that they are exposing themselves to by giving shelter to such elements, because it's eventually going to harm Canadian society itself, having so many of these violent elements in Canada itself. Nijjar, when he was there in Canada after having entered fraudulently, had all kinds of cases against him. He had fights with local groups. So he's hardly the kind of role model that Canada should start revering or honoring. But for somehow, Canada has always had a long tradition of this kind of behavior. You mentioned about the Air India bombing. Now, the way the Canadians covered up that bombing that was perpetrated by elements in Canada is one of the worst cover-ups of a terror act in the world. And the Canadian government was responsible for this. This has been brought out by Canada's own investigation. And that gives us hope that Canadian society itself has elements that will correct itself. And that is what we should bank upon, while we should make it known to the Canadian government that we will not tolerate such actions. I think we should deal with this with certain degree of sobriety. Our relations with Canada are otherwise there seem to be indications that you mentioned that Trudeau wants to improve relations. On the other hand, he's holding these mad ceremonies of honoring such unsocial elements, antisocial elements as Nijjar. So we have to wait and see what Canada wants to do. We have a large diaspora in Canada. We have a number of students. The number has come down drastically. Our exports to Canada, interestingly, went up last year. So we have this very diverse and a relationship that is there that needs to be nurtured. At the same time, we need to make clear to the Canadians that where security is concerned, there can be no negotiation, no talks, and no compromise.
General Katoj, there seems to be an entire ecosystem in Canada which is working against India. Now, I give you an example. These floats that come about on the anniversary of Operation Blue Star, extremely provocative, showing a former Indian Prime Minister being assassinated and its assassins holding guns and pointing at Indira Gandhi. What sort of how can that be accepted by India at all in the first place? Because if it is the entire ecosystem that is supporting this small bunch of people who are out to carry out terrorism and separatism and harm India's interests, what is India going to do about it? They're telling Canada to put your house in order, to put them in check, but they are not agreeing. They are not stopping them. And in fact, they are commemorating the person who has been designated as a terrorist. So it is actually encouraging the other elements who are putting out those floats year after year.
That is true. Yes, Zafar, that is correct. Now, the way I've looked at it is Canada is using terrorism as a tool of foreign policy, just the way Pakistan uses terrorism as a tool of foreign policy. I've actually started to get the idea that Canada and Pakistan are equally responsible for the spread of terrorism. Now, there's another point which I would like to give. There is, along with Canada, I'm going to club the United States and Europe and certain Western parts of Europe. Now, what they for a very long time, what these powers have wanted to do is to use certain aspects of human rights and the stick of terrorism to beat India with. And they want to use it whenever to control to a certain extent India's foreign policy. They have been very disturbed by the fact that India's foreign policy has become more assertive and more aligned to India's interests in the last decade. And we are not aligning ourselves with American interests or Western interests when it does not suit India's interests. An example is India's neutrality as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned, and we are continually buying oil from Russia. Now that has not gone down very well with the West, because they are still thinking of us as a slave country, which we are bound to obey what they dictate. Now those days are over. Indian diplomacy has changed to a very great extent, but I think Canada still hasn't seen the writing on the wall, and America hasn't seen the writing on the wall, but they will very soon. So they are using this as a tool at every time to tell India, we can make trouble for you if you don't behave. Well, they can make trouble for us, that is all right, but we know how to handle such cases. We know how to handle the Khalistani terrorists. We know how to handle the Islamist terrorists also. So there is nothing which they can teach us. But they are using terrorism now as a tool of foreign policy, and I think they will be responded to appropriately by our Ministry of External Affairs. Zafar.
Right. Ambassador Sinha, the point that General Katoj brought about, India's independent foreign policy. India has connections with Russia, so it has with Ukraine. India has a relationship with Israel, but at the same time, India is supporting the people of Palestinian as far as their humanitarian assistance is concerned. Is this really the issue? Is this the thorn in the eye of the West, that they want to put checks and balances and put India in its place according to them? And that's why they are, encouraging such things or not taking action against such elements in Canada or in other places in Europe.
Well, to a great extent, that is true. These countries follow a policy of giving asylum to dissident elements in other countries, and they use these elements to put pressure upon those countries. Now, this is something that's true not only of elements from India going to these countries, but from other countries as well. So we have to deal with this, the reality of their policy. It's not confined to the Western countries; other countries also do it. At the same time, I think we also need to understand that while we should continue to pursue our independent foreign policy, we have been hesitant in or reticent in naming these countries in forums such as the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, where we speak in general terms. But if we have evidence of, let's say, funding coming from Canada for terrorist elements in India, then we should take up these in these forums. In the Security Council, when discussions take place on terrorism, we should start naming and shaming countries the way these countries, other countries do. I think we should not be hesitant to name them, even if our relations in other areas are good. So we have to accept that relations between countries can follow different tracks. And on some tracks, relations can be good. In certain other areas, they can be difficult. And we should learn to keep these different tracks in relationships with these countries.
It's also a fact that if it's FATF or international forums or the UN, India's focus has been essentially just on Pakistan. But here, there is a problem that's bigger than Pakistan as of now, as it today. When we see those floats, when we see honoring a terrorist in the parliament, don't you see it's a bigger problem? It needs more attention than the traditional sort of a thinking or traditional sort of a policy that's being applied at the international level.
Is that to me or to General Katoch?
Yes, to you, sir.
Yes, you're quite right. We have to understand that the terrorism that comes into India is not merely from Pakistan. So our exclusive focus on Pakistan dilutes the attention that we need to give to global terrorism. And Pakistan is using a lot of these elements in other countries to foment terrorism in India. And we should be aware of this, and we should not be hesitant to take up these matters in these international forums, because these are the only forums available to us. So while we need to take action internally to protect our interests, internationally, we have to start naming and shaming these countries just the way these countries do. So it is part of the international foreign policies of various countries, and we should follow the same policy instead of being hesitant to name countries simply because we are scared that it will spoil relations in other areas. That may be so, but I think we should be able to handle that, just as these countries are able to handle that. The fact that Canada harbors terrorists and yet has relations with India, the two prime ministers met recently, means that it is possible to conduct foreign policy on different tracks and keep those tracks independent of each other, and ensure that the pressure that needs to be put on these countries to make them walk their talk on terrorism must be maintained.
Right. I wanted to draw your attention towards a survey now. You know, there are political ramifications within Canada and also in India due to the ongoing controversy. You have that survey on the screen now. This survey has noted positive appraisal of India has declined by 11 points in Canada since March 2023. A minority, one-third, 33%, who say they view the Canada favorably are outnumbered by the majority, 54%, who do not. So the positive rating of India, which was 56% in 2019, has come down. Do you see this as a cause of worry for India also? Because while on one hand we're dealing with the government in Canada, but at the level of the people also, when this is continuing and no action is being taken by Canada, it has an impact that goes down the line as well.
Developments, but I don't think we need to get too unnecessarily worried about them, because we must get to the cause of these. Now, one of the reasons is that people like Jagmeet Singh and the New Democratic Party are promoting feelings of animosity against India. One sees programs being prepared by them accusing India of being behind these killings, totally unfounded allegations being made by people. Now, that needs to be countered by us, and we should take this into account in framing our policy. But we should also remember that the diaspora that goes out, the migrants who go out, often take a very frozen narrative of the country that they left behind, and very often that narrative gets gets dictated by factors like publicity by New Democratic Party and people like Jagmeet Singh. And it is important for us to try and address these, but not get too worried about them, because we should know what motivates these people to pursue such policies.
We lost General Khatoj. Basically, the question that I was asking to Ambassador Sinha, that there is a survey that has come about recently which says that the positive appraisal of India in Canada has declined by 11 points. Now, there is a lingering issue, particularly for last 1 year. Canadian Prime Minister stood up in his parliament and said that agents of the government of India are responsible for the killing of Nijjar. And then 1 year has passed. They have not shown any evidence, provided any evidence. They have allowed the Khalistanis to carry out their agenda. And now today they are honoring a terrorist. Do you think that it has a ripple down effect to the ordinary people also? And that is another cause of worry for India, not just dealing with the government, but also with the people where the ratings are coming down, as that survey indicates.
Now, Zafar, it also depends on who all have been taken for the survey. Does it reflect the common Canadian or what? So I won't really take the survey too seriously. But the question is, it certainly does have an impact. And the way the media covers India in Canada, the way the media is covering India, also by the mainstream media, the Washington Post, etc., in the United States, it is very, very negative. And the prime purpose is to get a government in Delhi which will bow down to their dictates. And they're not getting that government, so they are getting desperate now. They want a government which is weak and pliable, whom they can control. Now, this is fundamentally the reason why all this is happening. Once they get a government of that nature, suddenly they will say India is a very nice country and all peace and happiness prevails. But that is not going to happen. India has grown now. We don't need them as much as they need us. So while, yes, it is a matter of concern to India, I think it should be a bigger matter of concern to Canada and the people of Canada. It is not foreign relations are not one-sided. That okay, India is a dependent country and they are the suppliers. We don't need Canada. Let me make that very clear. If necessary, we don't need any of them. We are a self-existing entity. We can manage on our own. If we have friends, all the better. If we don't have friends, we'll manage without it. But we will not have friends who try to dictate terms to us. That India is gone. The pre-1947 India is gone. We are entering into a new era. And that is something which many of these people, they still have that colonial mindset. They have not understood it yet. And I think over the next 5 years, that understanding will be made very clear to them by the Prime Minister and the External Affairs Minister and our diplomats who are working in various missions abroad. That is my broad take of what is happening. As far as this particular instance is concerned, you see, Canada, I don't think there's any doubt in Canada's mind that this killing was carried out by inter-gang rivalry within the groups in Canada. There is a great deal of rivalry in the Gurdwaras. And the people who have carried out this killing are 20 to 22-year-old kids or something. They have been apprehended now. It has taken a very long time for the Canadians to apprehend them. But even Canada knows, and their security agencies know, that none of them are linked to India. All of them have got linkages for the local political ends and the wars which the Gurdwaras are fighting amongst themselves. That is the fundamental problem. And they're trying to pin it on to India now. It is not going to carry any water. It will have absolutely no weight. And if Canada wants to delude itself of its great power status because it is linked to the United States, then they can continue playing the game of the poodle of the United States. Where the United States orders, that is where the poodle will go. Well, for the Canadians, right, if they can accept it, the pride can accept it, so be it. India is going to follow its own path, and I think we are on the right path. Zafar.
Right. There's another case of Pannoon, Gurpatwan Singh Pannoon in the US, where United States has provided some information to India, and India is saying that it's seriously looking into that matter. India has made that very clear. But as far as Canada is concerned, obviously, nothing has been given to India to look into. India has been saying the Minister of External Affairs, has been saying that when we get something concrete, we'll look into it. That is how civilized nations behave. But Ambassador Sinha, I want to ask you that after this moment of silence in the Parliament, there was this tweet put out by the Consulate of Vancouver, wherein it brought out that issue of the Kanishka bombing, in which so many people were killed. And India said, obviously, it's not going to tolerate terrorism. You can see that on the screen. India stands at the forefront of countering the menace of terrorism and closely working against it. And then it talks about the Air India Flight 182 Kanishka bombing. So that is also there, that this has happened in Canada some years ago. There is a context to all of this.
Well, yes. Now, these are things that India should pursue both bilaterally with these countries and take up in international forums as well. When America was attacked on 9/11, they took it up and they changed the entire world's policy on terrorism. Now, the Kanishka bombing was of the same scale. It was at that time the biggest air disaster and air terror act that had taken place in the world. And yet Canada covered up the investigation, and we also did not take it up as strongly as we should have. We should have put Canada in the dock on that, and we should continue to do that, because even today the actions taken by Canada on the investigation have not been executed fully. We should not let Canada out of the dock on this one. Whether it is 30 years old or 40 years old doesn't matter. We must take up these matters bilaterally as well as in multilateral forums and insist that Canada take action. We have to put Canada in the dock on these matters so that we have specific evidence and we go and discuss those things with them. That is extremely important, that we don't let go of Canada on this. Then there are other relations. Well, those can continue as long as our mutual interests are met.
Yes. Before we wrap up, General Katoch, we talked about Pannu, Gur Patwan Singh Pannu. There is something that's been given by the US. India is looking at it. But the fact remains that he is threatening people to board an Air India flight. He is clearly giving calls for terrorism, for assassination. How does this work? That nothing is being done to silence him there.
Certain countries, this is the hypocrisy of certain countries who outwardly appear to be fighting international terrorism. Now here, imagine what would happen if there was a US citizen who is taken asylum in India, who openly threatens the government of the United States and their people. This is exactly what this Pannu chap has been doing in the United States, and we have let him go.
Yeah.
The United States has not taken any action on him. And, they have laid down, somebody was trying to kill him. But then these very people, the way people like Pannu operate, they have got a whole range of enemies there, because they're also vying for a certain slice of economic heft, that certain monies which coming their way. Now, they are trying for all of that. So there is a lot of competition for that, and they are working for their intelligence agencies. The way Nijjar was working for the Canadian intelligence agency, this chap, Pannu, is working for the American intelligence agencies. That is why they use them as assets. And they permit them to carry out these activities because they use them as tools which can be deployed against India. But the Indian government has called out the hypocrisy. I think it's a very good first step. Our foreign policy has become very assertive. It is looking into India's interests, and it will remain like that for the next 5 years and beyond into the foreseeable future.
Right. Ambassador, in a couple of days ago, Nikhil Gupta, the Indian national, has been extradited from Czech Republic to US. But looking forward, how should India, deal with Canada as far as this foreign relations? We know that there's been a strained relationship for a year now. But what is the way forward? The two countries are concerned. India has been making it clear that please supply evidence, supply details if you have any about Indian involvement. That has not happened so far. But at the same time, they keep on honoring Nijjar and allowing other Khalistani to carry out their activities. What really is the way forward?
Said, telling Canada that these elements are bad both for India-Canada relations and for Canada itself. And we should insist on action being taken by Canada. And if Canada does not take any action, then that should start impacting India-Canada relations. And also, we should take up these matters internationally in various international forums, so as to name and shame Canada and to reveal to the world, just the way Pakistan is today recognized as a promoter of terrorism in the world, so also should Canada be. Canada cannot get away with a Teflon image of washing away all these terror acts that it is promoting. We should insist on naming Canada in various forums that we talk about internationally, and then also let India-Canada relations be impacted by that.
Well, General Khatoj and Ambassador Sinha, thanks so much for joining us and giving your perspective on this important issue. But clearly, it's a provocation days after Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister for the third term, honoring a man who has been designated as a terrorist right inside the Parliament of Canada. Thanks so much for joining us and for watching the Mojo Story.
Mojo Story has always made a commitment to its viewers to go to where the story is. And as you can see here, we are at the epicenter of the Israel war on Gaza. We are right at the front line, about 1 mile from the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli military gets ready with its tanks and its gunners to begin its final frontal assault that will take troops into Gaza. As we said, it's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.